A college football playoff berth is on the line as Oregon and Washington meet in a rematch in the Pac-12 championship. Eric Skopil and Chris Fetters are here to break this one down. These teams met in the regular season in a Week 7 classic when Washington squeaked out a 36-33 win. And they've trended opposite directions since, as Oregon has won its last 6 games by an average of 24 points a game, but Washington has won its last 6 by an average of 6.5 points again. So now they meet again with the same implications on the line. Eric, what are some takeaways each team has from that previous meeting?
Well, I think for Oregon, it's just significant to be back here. This has been kind of the carrot they've been, put in front of them since that loss up in Seattle. Players have talked a lot this week about how that motivated them, how that kept them on the right path. And I think it's pretty simple for Oregon. It's a pick your spots and avoid some mistakes and some big parts in this game. I mean, you can look last week's earlier this season's game, I should say. Just 3 specific plays where Oregon fails on 4th down, and a couple happen in the red zone. And those are the sort of plays I think Oregon's looking to kind of focus on and improve upon. And then the other part is getting after the quarterback. Getting to Michael Penix. Not just getting to him, but getting him to the ground. I think these are the things that Oregon felt like they did an okay job with in the first game. I think they got to him several times, but they only were able to finish with 1 sack in that one. So I feel like that's another key in this one for Oregon is to feel like they can improve their ability to make it difficult on Penix in that offense.
And for Washington, I think that they learned that, if with a win, everything else was still right in front of them. Their whole mantra this year has been us versus us. It's been one game at a time. It's a player-led team with a lot of veteran leadership. And those guys were just never going to let any particular one game become bigger than it needed to be. But that win over Oregon allowed them to really focus on the next game and then the next game after that. And they had a November gauntlet like no one else in the country. They had to go win at USC. Then they had to go win against a Utah team that is always tough, the back-to-back Pac-12 champs. And then they had to go to Corvallis and beat an Oregon State team that was highly motivated, a top 15 team in the pouring rain, in the elements, and they were able to make it happen. And to be able to come away with an Apple Cup win on the last play of the game, to be able to keep that 12-0 dream alive, I think that the Oregon lesson that they've learned is that if they execute and if they stick to their game plan and they do what they need to do, they can achieve anything. And that means getting to this Pac-12 title game on Friday. That means getting past the Pac-12 title game to try to get to a college football semifinal. And the reality is, guys, this game is basically a college football playoff quarterfinal game. Besides the Alabama-Georgia game, this is the one game out there in terms of a conference championship game where both teams have a legitimate chance to get to the playoff. And so everything is at stake. Everything that both teams have worked for comes to this moment, and we'll see who shines brightest on the biggest stage.
Now they have a chance to send the Pac-12 out in style. The Pac-12 has gone 7 years without a rep in the college football playoff. That's the longest drought of any Power 5 league in this 4-team era. Oregon and Washington can obviously potentially end that streak. But Chris, what's the significance of competing in this last Pac-12 title game?
Well, Grace, I think it is fitting because the 2 teams from the Pac-12 that have made the college football playoff happen to be the 2 teams that are playing on Friday, University of Oregon, University of Washington. And Washington was the last team to do it back in 2016. And yeah, they want to be able to get past what they were able to do back in 2016. They lost to number 1 Alabama at that time in the Peach Bowl. But to be able to play in the last one is obviously very, very bittersweet for a program that has really prided itself on being one of the best football programs, not just in the Pac-12, Pac-8, Pac-10, but all of West Coast football. To be able to switch that up and now be a part of a different conference next year is going to be really, really interesting and very different and exciting on a number of fronts. But it's also hard not to be a bit sad about the way this thing has come around. And I think selfishly, if you're looking at it from Washington's point of view, they picked the wrong time to go 12-0 with the way that all these other teams nationally have gone, because everyone expected a hiccup from one of these top teams to break the unbeaten streak, whether it was a Florida State or maybe a Georgia or something like that, or a Michigan, and it just hasn't happened. And so for Washington to be able to get to that playoff, having to beat another team that they already beat in the regular season, and it just so happens to be the other team that has made it to the college football playoff from the Pac-12 conference. I think it's fitting that that's how it ends, and I think that it's going to be a super, super exciting night on Friday. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and Chris did a great job of outlining, the move from conference to conference and what it means for each school and the bittersweet nature of it. And, the fact is the winner of this game will go into the Big Ten with just a little bit more momentum. And I think from a rivalry perspective, as somebody who's lived up here in the Pacific Northwest my entire life, like what a cool opportunity for these teams to add another chapter to it, because it really hasn't been this earlier this year was the first ranked meeting between these two teams. Well, now this is, as Chris said, basically a play-in game for the playoff, and one of these teams gets to say, hey, we beat our biggest rival for a chance to go, and the other team gets a chance to say, gosh, we lost to our biggest rival. What a big thing you can actually take away from the other opponent, and just to kind of add and build to this rivalry. So whatever the outcome is, one of the fan bases is going to come out really beating their chest and feeling good about things, and the other one's going to say, man, a really special season was just ended by our biggest rival. That's going to take a while to get over.
All right, let's get into the passing game now, led by two season-long Heisman contenders in Michael Penix and Bo Nix. Obviously, there's the potential for fireworks at any time, but both teams also have a run game they can lean on as well. Eric, I'll start with you. Bo Nix can set the FBS record for completion percentage in a season. What are you expecting from him in round 2 against Washington?
Well, it's going to be a challenge, just like it was up there the first time. I mean, Nix had, I think, a really impressive showing, but there were also, if you go back and, again, I focused on those fourth down plays. I think those are things where Nix comes away, and there were a couple incompletions there that if the ball ends up in somebody else's hands, the game might go a little differently. And so those are the things coming out of this one where Nix in the first one, I thought, played really well. I think statistically it holds up, but you would also say some of those fourth down plays need to be a little better. But, I think one of the big things coming into this one for Oregon is the second half of the season. You've seen a real, development in the pass game in terms of it's not just been Troy Franklin. Tez Johnson, Nix's younger brother, has really emerged, and over the last 6 weeks has actually outproduced Franklin statistically. He's had 4 100-yard games. He's had a couple multi-touchdown games. I think the fact that now that it's not just Troy Franklin, I won't say it or bust, but it's Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson, 1A and 1B, I think that has diversified this pass attack, and I'll be very curious to see if Oregon can continue to maximize both of these guys.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Washington's receiving core, who has done a phenomenal job all year long, is that they're going a little bit in the different direction, because the last handful of games, it's basically been Rome Odunze or bust. Because Jalen Polk, the last 2 games, has literally had 0 catches for 0 yards. Jalen McMillan is just coming back from injury. He got a little bit of time against Oregon State. He looked a lot better in the Apple Cup, where he had 5 catches. I expect him to be a big part in what's going on in this championship game. And then obviously Michael Penix is going to have to use guys like Jack Westover, who have been a really, really key part of that passing game all year long. But it is interesting because they were so well-rounded and so deep and so balanced at the beginning of the season. But by the time it really came to crunch time in November, in those games that everyone remembers, it's been basically Michael Penix Jr. to Rome Odunze, and Rome Odunze has shown himself to be one of the top guys in the entire country, finalist for the Biletnikoff Award and all of the honors that all the top receivers get. So they're going to have to find something a little bit more beyond just Rome Odunze in this game on Friday, because guys like Jalen Polk, they're going to have to come back and be a factor. Guys like Giles Jackson, who didn't play in the Apple Cup to maintain a red shirt so he can come back next year for the Huskies, well, he's eligible now to play again in this Pac-12 championship game because it's now in the postseason. So they're going to expect Giles Jackson to be a big factor. Jalen McMillan needs to continue to come back and be stronger and stronger. And then Dylan Johnson, Tybo Rogers, guys coming out of the backfield, Will Nixon, they're going to have to use those guys as well. But Michael Penix is going to be the focus point of all this stuff, as he has been all year. But what's interesting, guys, he threw for over 400 yards a game in each of the first 3 non-conference games of the season. After that, the most he's thrown is basically right around 370 yards at Stanford. I think the Pac-12 started to figure out Michael Penix a little bit. And whether that started with the Oregon game or not, I mean, that's up for debate. But the bottom line is Michael Penix Jr., if Washington has a chance to stay in this game and win this game on Friday, a lot of it's going to have to happen on his arm.
It's been interesting to watch the perceptions of these two teams in terms of the betting lines. First time they met, Washington was the small home favorite, so that's essentially a coin flip on a neutral site. Now Oregon is a favorite by 2 possessions. So, Chris, if Washington gets win number 2 against the Ducks, what's the key to getting a win?
Well, I think a lot of it is based on, Grace, the keys that allowed them to win the first time around. They were able to run the ball a little bit. Dylan Johnson got his first 100-yard game as a Husky. He was able to build on that, and I think he's gotten stronger and stronger. They're going to need a really strong game from him on Friday in order to create that balance they're going to need to allow Michael Penix some open pockets and to get the ball downfield a little bit. So I think they've got to run the ball really well, and also they have to really be stout at the point of attack with the run game. Tuli Letuligasenoa on the defensive line has been a stalwart, and it's been noticeable, guys, when he has been in as opposed to when he has not been in terms of being able to stop the run at the point of attack. And with Bucky Irving, Jordan James, those guys are 2 of the best in the Pac-12 conference, if not the best. They have to be on point up front for Washington's front 7. That's going to be a big key. And also talking to the players and coaches this week, one of the big keys was turnover battle. They lost the turnover battle in their last game against Oregon. They were not able to force any turnovers. And then Michael Penix threw the interception. So they've got to win that turnover battle. And that's always crucial because, again, we're talking about a monumental game with 2 top 5 teams nationally. It's never happened in the series, never happened in the history of this rivalry. These types of things are the things that matter when it comes to the difference between winner or losing this type of game. So turnover battle, run the ball, stop the run, and just basically execute your game plan. If you can execute your game plan, you've got a great chance to win this game.
I think both teams feel confident in what they can do offensively, right? And the numbers stack up in terms of what they've done consistently throughout this season. Oregon hasn't been held under 30 points once all year, and I think the last game against Oregon State was the lowest of the season with 31. So you feel confident that you're going to get some stuff going offensively. And I think for Oregon, it's avoiding mistakes. They've had penalty problems all season. They've been really good at protecting the football. I think 6 turnovers all season, one of the best numbers nationally. But the penalties have been at times problematic. And red zone efficiency. There have been times, and this is something that comes back up from the first matchup, was a couple of opportunities down in the red zone against the Huskies where you take the field goal, maybe it's differently, or if you convert on those 4th downs and execute a little better, that game goes differently. So I think offensively, that's probably the key for Oregon is maximizing those individual plays and situations. And defensively, can Oregon stack up in the secondary? They've been a remarkably healthy team this year, but there is a current injury with starting corner Julio Florence, who has been, I would say, amongst the most improved players this season. It doesn't seem like he's available to play this week. And if that's the case, how does Oregon handle Rome Odunze, Jaleel McMillan, Jaleel Polk, or all of these guys, Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk, apologies, all of these guys that Washington can throw at you? Because this will be an opportunity for Washington to really target some players for Oregon who just haven't been forced to play as much. And that was also, we should note, something that happened in the second half of the first meeting where Oregon was without its top 2 corners, Florence included.
All right, the last Pac-12 championship ever kicks off under the Friday night lights, and it'll be a good one. Eric and Chris, thanks so much. And for more coverage on this game, check out Ducks Territory and Dogman.com for all your Oregon and Washington football and recruiting news all season long.